So far, we've been creating these simple looking websites with some header, some body area, and some footer. But with the power of CSS, we can make these simple little websites into more professional and beautiful looking. So let's take a look. For that, we will be using margins, padding, and basically the box model that you see over here. That's called the box model. We're going to be using different spacing and borders technique so we can actually make these particular websites or web pages more beautiful. So let's take a look. So I've created this simple little website that you saw right here, and this is the HTML for it. So I've created the header element, the main element, and the footer element. Inside the header element, I have a div and with an ID of site name, and it just simply says my website. I have navigation and some links, and in the main area, I have some H1 and some dummy text in the P paragraph or P element. In the footer, I have some copyright information and some navigation links as well that you can simply see over here. Now let's take a look. In my code over here in my CSS, I have nothing. So just for starters, I'm going to style these by adding some colors. So I have header with some color, main with some color, and footer with some color. And one beautiful thing about VS Code is if you write some hash colors, and if you simply hover over, click and hover over this particular hex colors, you can actually, the pop-up shows up for a color picker. So you can pick whatever color you like. So I'm gonna pick one of these colors, and I'm gonna save and go back over here, refresh, and you see the colors are over here. Now this is a little bit progress, but the beauty of a web page comes with the space that is created between elements. Space in design is everything. So we can achieve that with padding and margins. So let's take a look. So over here in my header, I'm going to come over here and say padding, and I'm going to just simply say, let's say 20 pixels. Save and refresh, and you see there is some spacing, which is 20 pixels of space around this particular container. So if I right click and inspect, you see the dev tools open up, and if I go to header, you see that padding's over here. But if I go to the computed tab over here, you will notice that the padding is mentioned. You see the padding is spacing around the container, but still within the container. All right, that's why the background color is kind of within, it's covering the entire container, right? But if you want, let's say, margin, which is spacing outside of the container, then you use margin. So let's take a look and do some margins. So I come over here and say, okay, if I want some spacing outside of the container, I'm going to say margin, and I'm going to say, let's say 50 pixels. Save, refresh, and you see, if I select again, there's some 50 pixels of space outside of that container. So if I see over here, you see all of this space which got highlighted, and thanks to Chrome Developer Tools, if I go over here and select it actually, or highlight, just hover over, it actually highlights the spacing around. So let's, that's 50 pixels is too much. So let's just style this a little bit. I'm going to just simply remove this. And just to make this website a little bit more beautiful, I'm going to add the same padding on the footer and the main area. And I'm going to change the body color to, let's say, some kind of gray. So I'm going to say background color, and I'm going to put hash and put, let's say, just hover over here and select some kind of gray color. Save, refresh, and I'm going to close this, and you see just by adding some space and simple colors, this looks slightly more beautiful, right? This looks a little bit more professional looking, right? So now let's say you want some space between these two, right? And you don't want a space on top of this particular header, but just on the bottom. That's when you're going to use margin. So you come over here and say, okay, I want some space on over here. So I'm going to say margin, and let's say 5 pixels. Save, refresh, and there's some space at the bottom, but also on the left, right, and top. And you don't want that. So for that, if you just want space at a particular section or a different space on a different section, you can actually use something called margin bottom or margin top or margin right or margin left. So I'm going to say margin dash bottom, and I want, let's say, 5 pixels over here. But for the rest of the space, let's say on top, I want 0. And for left and right, I want 0 as well. So I'm going to say left 0 and right 0. So margin top is 0, left right is 0 as well. But on the bottom, I want 5 pixels. All right, so save, refresh, and you see that 5 pixel is gone and only the 5 pixels on the bottom is showing. Now you may be noticing that there's some space around the entire body area over here, right? So let's take a look what's happening. And that's where the Chrome developer tools come very handy. You simply right click over here, you go to the body element, and you see over here in the computed area that by default, I'm going to make this big, by default 8 pixels of margin is actually applied on the body of our page. And if I go to styles over here, you see it says user agent style sheet, margin 8 pixel. That means that by default, the browser is applying a margin of 8 pixels on our page. So if you don't want that, we can simply come over here and override that property. So I can say margin 0 pixels. So all the sides of the web page of the body element is not going to have the margin. So I come over here and now I refresh and you see the margin is gone and only this particular margin is there because that's where what we applied on the header area. Now one last thing I want to leave you with on this particular section about margins and padding is the first thing is that just the way you have margin top, left, right, you can do the same thing with padding as well. So let's say if you do not want 20 pixels of padding all around, you just want it on the top, you can simply come in over here and say, okay, on the top I want 20 pixels. On the bottom, let's say I want 50 pixels, and the rest of the sides which are remaining, let's say padding, I want to keep it, let's say 5 pixels. All right, save and refresh, and you see top is 20, bottom is 50, and the sides are 5. And if you just want to inspect, you can right click inspect and scroll up, go to elements, go to, I misclicked the area, so that's why it didn't open the right section. So if I go to main over here, scroll up and go to computed, you see 20 on top, 5 on the sides, and 50 on the bottom. So you see that's how you control space. Now the one last thing that I want to tell you about in this video is actually instead of writing this long format of top, bottom, left, and right, you can actually use the shorter format of just the padding property. And let's say if you want to replicate this exact section, you can do it like such. You can just simply say padding over here, and then you can provide 4 properties for the 4 sides. So the first one is top, then right, then bottom, and then left. So it's basically going clockwise, just the way the clock ticks. It's from right hand side on your right. So it's top, right, bottom, left. So over here you're going to provide the top property. Let's say it's 20 pixels. Then you're going to provide the right hand side property, which is let's say 5 pixels, and then the bottom, which is 50 pixels. And then on the left hand side, you're going to provide the 5 pixels for the left. So basically, when you do this particular format, it's the same thing as writing 4 properties of padding top, padding bottom, padding right, and padding left. Just the way you wrote it over here, you could actually do the same thing for margin. So you can say margin 0, 0, 5 pixels, and 0. So basically top, right, bottom, and then left, right? So it's basically clockwise. So I'm just going to order it in the same way, like such. So 20, 0, 0, 5, and 0, 0, 0, 5, and 0. So if I save, refresh, there's going to be no difference because basically we just wrote the shorthand of these properties over here. So that's what I want to leave you with. Margin and padding, you know the long format and the short format. You already know what margins are applied outside the container, and padding is the space applied inside the container. With that, I'm going to talk to you in the next video where we're going to learn about borders.